Can't see.
Oh, you're recording.
I think Alex is going to start recording. And unfortunately, people in the room can't see me, but I'm right here. My name is Caitlin Jones. I'm the coordinator for our homeownership study. And the Homeownership Subcommittee of the Housing Commission has been helping staff with sort of providing direction and guidance on the study as since we started last year. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about, Elise, if you can go to the next slide. Elise, could you go to the next slide? Well, it doesn't matter. I can just talk to it. We're going to provide some updates about what we've been working on since the last time we met in February, which includes some of the roundtables that we did in March. And we're going to give a little bit of an update about the major themes that we heard during those roundtables. We're also going to provide an overview of the community meetings engagement strategy that we're using over the summer to engage the community on developing a homeownership vision and goals. And then the majority of the meeting will focus on having a racial equity discussion using the county's racial equity framework. But before we do that, I did want to just, again, provide some quick updates about some new resources that we've released and what we've been up to for the last couple months. At least you can go to the next slide. Well, actually, first we'll talk a little bit about where we are in the timeline. But as you see, we're in phase 2. We're kind of gearing up for the community engagement, and this is the timeline that we've been using throughout the course of the study. So if you go to the next slide, I did want to mention just a couple things that have happened since our last meeting in February. Again, we conducted some roundtables in March, and Elise is going to go over what we heard during those roundtables in more detail in just a minute. We participated in the Live in Arlington Information Fair a couple weeks ago, where we shared some of the feedback that we received during those roundtables and engaged participants at that fair to see how they resonated with the major themes that came out of the roundtables. We've also posted 3 one-pagers of just providing an overview of some of the homeownership studies work to date. So there's one-pager on just a overview of the study, sort of what we're hoping to accomplish. There's another one that covers the barriers analysis and another that covers our homeownership programs. We also created an article and research library on our website just to help people stay informed about some of the research that we've been looking at as we've been designing and executing the study. And that's about it. So if there aren't any questions about any of that, I think we'll go quickly into the overview of the roundtables, and Elise is going to take it from there. So Elise, whenever you're ready. Yeah. Oh, and Elise, you're still muted if you're.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me go back to presenting. And sorry. All right. During February and March, we held 5 roundtables with specific populations. The first 2 were with realtors and mortgage lenders. And the idea there was that we started by speaking to practitioners in the kind of like home ownership space or in the field of home buying and home ownership to learn more about things that they had seen clients experience. And we used the information that we got from those 2 roundtables to refine some of our questions for the following three, which were held with condo owners, older adult homeowners in Arlington, and prospective and recent home buyers. So 3 groups of people who use services or programs provided by Arlington County, such as the condo education workshops that we have, the work that DHS and the Housing Division do with Rebuilding Together, which is a nonprofit that makes accessibility and other modifications to the homes of lower income and elderly homeowners. And then prospective and recent home buyers who might be using the Affordable Dwelling Unit Program or Moderate Income Purchase Assistance Program, MyPAP, or even Spark, which is a way to lower your interest rate. The numbers in parens show our turnout for each of the roundtables. Usually between 7 and 10, with the exception of the mortgage lenders, where we had 6 confirmed and only 3 show up. A quick note about the demographics of the people who participate in the roundtables. We had mostly diversity of ages, with the exception, logically, of the older homeowner roundtable, where all of our participants were between 60 and 89 years of age. And in fact, only one of the people who completed our demographic questions from that roundtable was in the 60 to 69 category, and that may actually have been a participant who volunteers with Rebuilding Together. So he was there not because he is a senior homeowner, but because he has worked with many in Arlington. Most of them good diversity of gender identities, the exception being our prospective and recent homebuyer roundtable, which was majority female. And when we talk about race and ethnicity, the majority of the roundtables were majority white, except again for prospective and recent homebuyers, where 6 out of the 7 people who completed our questionnaire for that roundtable identified as being non-white. Mainly from the realtors, lenders, and condo owner roundtable, we learned about specific challenges facing condominium owners in Arlington. The major concern that we heard voiced was condo fees, which many existing condo owners have seen increase over the years. One condo owner in our roundtable pointed out that his or her condo building and others still don't vary their fee structure based on unit sizes. Not true of all condos buildings in Arlington, but true of some. The other challenge that seemed to come up most frequently when discussing condos were issues of maintenance and structural repairs. And among the mortgage lenders, we even heard that they've had experiences of the FHA refusing to approve a loan for specific condos that didn't meet their safety and building inspection criteria. In the older adult homeowners roundtable, we heard about homes that layout-wise are not meeting seniors' needs. And this was corroborated in the Realtor Roundtable as well. There's concern about older homeowners in Arlington living in what may be even unsafe conditions. And the reasons for that are difficulty with making adaptations to homes, especially on a fixed income. Our mortgage lenders pointed out that seniors can use reverse mortgages to fund some of these repairs, but they tend to be underused in terms of lending products. The older adult homeowners themselves uh, voiced some frustration with their own abilities to negotiate with contractors or look for ways to finance home improvements. There was a lot of concern about not being able to advocate for themselves when dealing with contractors and not fully understanding the problems that they were hiring people to come to their homes and fix. Um, so we heard a lot about challenges of staying in existing homes, but with the older adult homeowners, we also heard some people talk about how for them, the cost of moving into a retirement community or assisted living situation was just too great, and it was actually more financially feasible for them to remain in their homes, um, even if they had to modify them. Okay, the next couple of slides are about our uh, uh, learnings about challenges being faced by people who are trying to purchase homes in Arlington. And primarily this information is coming from the realtor, mortgage lender, and recent and prospective homebuyer roundtables. Probably not a surprise to anyone. Prices are frequently a purchase barrier in the Arlington market, as is just low inventory of housing that's for sale for people to own. Kind of going along with the inventory, realtors and some of the mortgage lenders mentioned that they had had clients be discouraged by the lack of diversity of housing types in Arlington and the age of some of our housing stock. And there was a good discussion in all three of the roundtables that I mentioned specifically about the trade-offs that people tend to make to live in Arlington, which include not having an in-unit washer dryer or forgoing having a yard and green space because they end up purchasing a condo in Arlington. Another issue that we learned about was in the Arlington market, buyers may be facing competition, sometimes with people who can make an all cash offer to purchase a home. Another set of challenges, probably not surprisingly, were financial, and our mortgage lenders explained that they frequently see clients not being able to get financing due to things like limited savings, high debt to income ratio, lack of credit, or even omission of their banking information or other pertinent information about their financial situation. High interest rates and condo fees are some other financial purchase barriers. From the perspective and recent homebuyer roundtable, we heard several interested buyers say that their monthly rental rate is actually higher than what they would pay for a mortgage on a monthly basis. So it would make sense for them to purchase, but they can neither afford to buy something in Arlington without any assistance, nor do they qualify for county programs. So in terms of financial challenges, um, there are people falling into kind of a middle area where they're not eligible for county assistance, but they also are not able to make a purchase on their own. And last but not least, we asked in the realtor, mortgage lender, and home buyer roundtables if clients or the individuals themselves had experienced challenges that they thought that their white counterparts would not have experienced, or challenges for the lenders and realtors observing clients experiencing challenges that their white clients did not experience. And in both the mortgage lender and realtor roundtable, um, the initial response was to talk about what the law is in terms of discriminatory practices, and we ended up needing to kind of rephrase our questions and say, well, we know that there are laws and policies in place to prevent discrimination, but think about specific socio-demographic groups, maybe immigrants, and that brought out some good responses about challenges faced by immigrants in learning about homeownership programs, using homeownership programs, and home buying, including a tendency in some immigrant communities to rely mostly on cash, and to have some cultural distrust of the banking system in the US. During the prospective and recent homebuyer roundtable, we heard several people say that as people of color, they feel systematically disadvantaged in the housing market. And they talked about how options that they could afford in Arlington tended to be concentrated in neighborhoods with lower socioeconomic status and lower performing schools. So in the mortgage lender and realtor roundtables, especially, we asked people about how they help their clients overcome home buying challenges. We also had one member of the prospective and recent home buyer roundtable who had recently purchased a home using Arlington's ADU program. So we asked her kind of what made that possible for you. And the answers that we got cited improving education and knowledge of home buying among their clients, working with clients to develop a plan to improve their credit over a set period of time, recommending that clients use programs from sources like Arlington County and Virginia Housing, and also helping clients work to kind of combine programs, such as maybe MyPap and Spark, to help them make a purchase or to ensure that their interest rate is not too high. We heard a great deal, not to like suggest we're going to rest on our laurels, but we heard a great deal of satisfaction with Arlington's homeownership programs. among the practitioners and among the prospective and recent home buyers themselves. But there were a number of things that our roundtable participants mentioned that they thought might be beneficial or might help more people use Arlington's programs, starting with the need to share information about them more widely and more effectively. The amount of time that is needed to use the MyPAP program was cited, as was the maximum sales price for MyPAP, which right now is $500,000. Some of the lenders and the home buyers themselves commented that that was fairly restrictive, especially in the Arlington market. We heard suggestions that Arlington should consider kind of a tiering of homeownership assistance, the way that other jurisdictions like Washington and Fairfax do. Some of our prospective and recent homebuyers were Arlington or Arlington Public Schools employees, and they would like to see expansion of the county's Live Where You Work programs. And finally, among the mortgage lenders, we heard some concerns about how the affordable dwelling unit program has a fairly exclusive list of lenders, and that once lenders make a loan to allow someone to purchase an ADU in Arlington, they have to keep that loan in their portfolio, which the mortgage lenders said was kind of limiting and potentially discouraged lenders from working with that program. So that concludes a very quick overview of what we learned from the roundtables, and we are also working with a consultant team to publish a more in-depth report about these 5 discussions, where to a large extent we heard that lived experience in Arlington is corroborating some of the things that we had discovered through the program analyses and the homeownership barriers analyses that were published earlier in the study. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Elise. I know some folks in the room have questions, so let's maybe open up to the room first, and then we can move on to the virtual.
Well, since I'm a visitor, not on the commission, I'll yield, but I do have a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead. All right, great. Julius Spain, many of you know, immediate past president of the NAACP, and thank you for your briefing. I was taking some notes here. At the beginning, you started talking about your outreach, right? So one thing about equity, right? No policy is going to be equitable unless the folks who are most affected are at the table. I'm a bit concerned about the actual number of people we touched between the past several months, and I'm just curious to know how do we reach those folks? Do we use nonprofits? Do we go through faith-based organizations to do some outreach? Because I think it's a relatively low number in comparison if we're talking about a large scale study. That's the first question. Second piece is I'm hearing about the mortgage lenders. You reached out to 6, 3 came. Would like to know who those mortgage lenders are, simply because, you know, when we start talking about banking financial institutions, i.e. Wells Fargo, I don't think we should be playing ball with them. And there's a whole number of reasons why. Discriminatory practices in the past. So I'm just curious. And the last, when we talk about MyPAP, I'm curious to know how many people received that assistance here in Arlington, more especially demographically. I know there's 3 questions there, maybe a lot. We can follow up later, but see if you can help me out understanding a bit of this.
Well, I can certainly speak to the first 2. So in terms of outreach for the roundtables, we worked with nonprofit partners like Karen Surface and Latino Economic Development Corporation, and Leadership Arlington and their young adult program, to both publicize the roundtables and to get names of individuals to whom we offered personal invitations by email and by phone. For each roundtable, we contacted, I would say, roughly 20 people to try to get participation. And our goal in each case was 10. That was what was identified with the help of some of our other comms and engagement practitioners as being a good number for the type of in-depth discussion we wanted to have. So really I would say the mortgage lender roundtable was the one where we fell most short of what we had wanted. In terms of just sharing information about this study and Arlington's programs, we've been sharing that much more widely. The audiences, if you will, for the roundtables were very targeted. So we didn't do a big push to kind of get come one, come all, because we were looking for people who had specific experiences. But we have been sharing information about the study via some of the more traditional channels that the county uses to communicate, like our e-newsletters, social media, and county website. The second question was, I think, about which mortgage lenders came. I can tell you that none of them were from a major bank like Wells Fargo or Bank of America. And I think we assured them that what they were saying was anonymous. So I can't give you their names, but they were all people who had been identified as having worked with clients of LEDC or of Arlington's homeownership programs, and who had some experience in this space of helping clients who might need some assistance in their purchasing. And the third question, I think, is best answered by Akiria.
If I could just allow, not to speak for staff or anything like that, but as we mapped out, and correct me if I'm wrong in sort of the overall engagement approach, you know, these were sort of initial exploratory outreach and discussion. That this phase of outreach is not the broad-based outreach to get. There's much more engagement planned over the course of the study. So this is kind of the way I think of it. And again, staff can correct me if I'm wrong. Is, you know, these types of in-depth conversations are helping us raise up more questions we need to ask in the more broader base, and issues we need to address in the more broader based engagement, so that we're, you know, obviously there'll be issues that come up in a broader based engagement that weren't raised in these roundtables, but this is to sort of create a more informed starting point for that more broad-based community engagement that will occur predominantly over the summer.
Yeah, and we're actually going to cover some of that today, just a broad-based plan of engagement. And I think for these roundtables, we really wanted to have this small, intimate conversations with people to hear their personal experience that allowed us to do that.
Can I add something on that? But I think it's critically important because where you start now is going to inform you on the audience that you take on and how you tackle a number of issues later on. What I'm getting at is I've heard some organizations, i.e. Leadership Arlington. I'm a alum of Leadership Arlington. But I'm gonna tell you, in Leadership Arlington, the group you want to talk to is not there. The people that they are connected to is not in the grassroots, is not in the community. I don't see that connection. So if you want to be make informed decisions or recommendations, and the people with lived experience, we want to first talk to the folks who've been here 30, 40 years maybe in the Green Valley, Halls Hill, Johnson Hill area, the people from, I would say, African American, Asian community. They will inform us because of their challenges, and that will help shape the broader conversation. I believe going to some of these organizations, I don't think we're getting the best. That's just my Jay's thought, right? So I think we have to do a little deeper dive, even at the early stage, because you are going across 230,000 people in the day.
Maybe some of the faith-based places.
Faith-based is awesome.
Yeah.
Faith-based is
So
awesome.
just a note, so a lot of the people that were invited, not all of them came,
Understood.
were clients of the Latino Economic Development Center where I work. And so we get referrals from Virginia Housing,
Sure.
Arlington County, other members of the community that have purchased. We have like a broad-based
Cool.
referral system. So at least the people that came from our organization, I think, are very indicative of the general first-time home buyer population. Again, but we are targeting people. We are targeting people at the low and moderate income level, not the whole. I mean, our organization.
I'm not here to. I'm just.
Yeah.
I honestly, I love that y'all are doing this. I want to help shape, whatever, however that means as a community leader, whatever it may be, because people are asking. Like we're talking about this. The MyPath piece.
That's great feedback. I think maybe we did cover the MyPath program and sort of our program just in general at the last meeting. So
I'm sorry.
no, it's okay.
Just wondering how many folks received it. That's
So
all. We have a
about
number?
25% of households that got MyPath from Black households. And then in terms of our affordable dwelling units, for our affordable dwelling units. But again, we are happy to provide you with the analysis of the.
Yeah, that's
I'm
what
It's
good.
a lot more,
I know there's other questions.
Yeah.
And then also, I did want to point out the lenders that we had to come and talk to us. Also, Virginia Housing approved. Not that that is necessarily an end-all be-all, but it really helped to kind of undergird the fact that they are trusted organizations and they were.
They have a local presence. They do have to have a local presence.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you all.
Okay. Looks like Nicole, you had a question.
Hi, yeah. Thank you for all the research that you've done and the feedback that you got. One comment or a couple of comments and a question. One is I want to reiterate my support of you increasing the MyPath sale price. I think that will give access to so many more people looking to purchase a home, especially townhomes, which is the more likely home for families in the county. So I'll continue to just encourage action on that. The second one is something that I think we've talked about almost every time that we've been here, which is the supply of home ownership stock, which there is in these roundtable discussions, I didn't see any developers in the room. And I still don't think that we've gotten data on the development site plan pipeline that we have in store for available units. And so I did some research before the meeting on active site plans under review or that are in the preliminary site plan review process that is actually dictating what our housing stock looks like currently and moving forward. I noticed that some of the comments that were given by some people were that there were super high condo fees, which is because we have such an old housing stock and condo stock specifically. We aren't building condos, we're building apartments. And that's really proven by the pipeline of what we have under review right now. We have 11 buildings, which is 3,000 units under review of apartments. We have one building of homeownership, and that's just in the River House because to be really honest with you, I was a pain in the ass during the Pentagon City Sector Plan and said we need more home ownership here. So the only home ownership stock we have is in that pre-site plan review process right now. And there are townhomes and condos. We have one building of condos that's accounting for 10% of that housing stock that's coming online that is home ownership based, which is to me discouraging because it took so much activism to get that condo building. It is probably not something that the market would have done naturally if it weren't for people in that Pentagon City Sector Plan pushing it. And we have more senior living and hotels, if you combine them, coming online than you have home ownership stock. And so I will reiterate the importance of focusing on the actual production of home ownership stock, because as much as I'm really hopeful that our missing middle plan will produce some homeownership stock, in other jurisdictions, it's been under 100 units and like half of them are homeownership. So that really isn't going to be your mass scale that you need to actually be effective in creating homeownership stock. And so we really need to focus on how we create condo ownership and what we need to do with developers to encourage that. And so I hope that we also get developers at the table to understand what their pressure points are and why they're developing condos in most other jurisdictions and not really in Arlington.
Thank you, Nicole.
I wanted to point out really quickly, and thank you for your comments, Nicole. With regard to increasing the purchase price for MyPath, I think it also needs to be understood that whatever we decide to do, we would have to increase the income limit, right? So currently, the income limit is at 80% of the area median income, and our purchase price average is about $340,000. So we know households at 80% of AMI are not going to be able to afford homes above $500,000. So coming along with an increase to purchase price would be an increase to the income limit, which I think is a part of the conversation in terms of tiering of assistance and the like, but I did want to clarify that. Thanks, Karen.
If I could also just talk to the AMI, and this is something that bothers me not only for that program, but also for our affordable housing ordinance, is that when you increase house size, it really only increases your income limit by $10,000. And so that's not truly the income of a second person. Specifically for a middle income household, you typically will have like $250,000 people, maybe $260,000 people. That's well below 80%. But if you actually have two of those people as income earners, then you're not able to meet that 80% AMI because it's not actually realistic of what two income earners is. And that bothers me both for this program and also our affordable housing ordinance, but that's another topic. But I would actually encourage us to look at how we designate increased household size, particularly between that 1 and 2, because it's not accounting for two income earners.
Let's take one more question, and it looks like Mike Heminger might have a question.
Hey, good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm on my phone, so I apologize that I can't be on camera. I just briefly wanted to lift up what Mr. Spain was mentioning. I also want to ground us in equity, which I know is the topic of our meeting today. But equity, the way that I define it, the way I see it, is really, us in positions of power and privilege, using that privilege to, seek the input from those that need the help the most first. It sounds like we went, to the developers, first, and some of those comments that are being shared with us are now providing the framework for, how we're moving forward. We all know the purpose of this study is for low to moderate income, but again, we're starting with, anonymous developers who may actually be inadvertently contributing to the systemic nature of the problem that we're trying to solve. And so I just think, for equity, if we're really going after it, perhaps we should have started with those that need the help the most, started with them first, use the comments and feedback from that roundtable to then guide the discussion instead of, starting with the developers. Just my my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we're running a little bit short on time, so I did want to, and thank you for your comments, Mike. I think we'll definitely have to go back and make sure that we're incorporating some of this feedback into our outreach plans for our community meetings, which I want to talk about next really quickly. I want to make sure we have enough time for the sort of main topic of conversation. So I'm going to try to do this really quickly. If you'll bear with me, I want to talk about what we're planning to do over the summer as far as engaging the public on developing vision and goals for homeownership. So Elise, if you could go to the next, if you could forward 2 slides. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about sort of where we are in the process. The next slide. Yep. This is our public engagement timeline, and it gives just a snapshot of what we're planning to do over the next couple of months as it relates to engaging the public in developing vision and goals. If you go to the next slide, Elise. And I want to talk to you and this is on the website too, and we'll send out a link and everything after the meeting. So the first step in the process is going to be establishing a vision, and we want to solicit community input on this. And we're going to start out in a twofold approach. And first, we're going to be creating an online feedback tool as an opportunity for the community to submit ideas about what a more equitable homeownership market will look like in the future. We're hoping to release this in June. We're going to mirror this process pretty similarly to a virtual community meeting that we want to hold at the end of June, where we're going to be asking the same questions, but this will be sort of the starting point in establishing what that homeownership vision will be. And so we're hoping that by sort of having an online opportunity and doing a virtual community meeting, it'll give a sort of diverse perspective for what the community envisions for our homeownership programs. So if you go to the next slide, Elise. After that, we want to check back in with the Homeownership Subcommittee and really start honing in on developing homeownership goals. So we'll talk through the vision statement and kind of break out into small groups to kind of start really talking about what the goals of our program should be. And that's right now planned for July 11th. And we'll be sending out more information with the group once we have more of the details figured out, but there will be opportunities for the subcommittee members to take a more active role in helping to develop those goals. Next slide, Elise. And after this, following this, we want to regroup with the community in a larger public community meeting towards the end of July to start developing objectives and strategies to achieve Arlington's homeownership vision and goals. This will be a larger community meeting where we want to do some very targeted and diverse outreach to a broad array of community members to make sure that we're capturing a diverse perspective on what our objectives and strategies should be. And we're hoping to, again, involve the subcommittee in sort of leading some of these conversations and really hone in on what those strategies could eventually be. Once we have conducted this meeting, we'll kind of take that information and run with developing the program recommendations. If you go to the next slide, Elise, in coordination with the consultants who are working on this project. And again, these are just some of the key elements of what we want the program recommendations to focus on. How can they be targeted to certain underrepresented groups, what the return on investment and financial feasibility of these programs would have to be, the resources needed, funding opportunities, prioritization of these recommendations, and we want to supplement with some case studies of what other communities are doing in this space. And go to the next slide, Elise. We also plan to check back in well, actually, if you go back one slide, Elise. We want to check back in with other stakeholders once we've established the vision and goals to ensure that we're engaging a broad range of individuals and make sure that they're aware of the study and understand the outcomes of the engagement process. We're hoping to do this in September of this year. And these are just some of the organizations that we're hoping to connect with on the study. As far as the subcommittee's involvement in the process, we're again hoping that subcommittee members will be involved in the execution of these meetings. We'll have some opportunities for small group moderators, note takers, make sure that you're staying engaged throughout the process. We're also going to be asking folks to share information with their networks to, again, encourage folks to participate in the process, but also make sure that people are informed of what's happening. And I should be sending, we'll be sending some information to subcommittee members in the next couple days to a week to ask for volunteers to sign up to help with some of these events. So that was really, really quick. I did not say everything that I wanted to, but I wanted to just make sure that we covered that since outreach had been a topic. And if there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand or jump in.
If you want to do a CivFed outreach, I'm happy to help you coordinate with them for September.
Great,
It
thank you
might
so
not
much.
be September, but it might be October, depending, because they usually have a school board forum in September, but I'll try to figure out what we can do.
Okay, yeah, actually that would be helpful to kind of brainstorm with you about the best way to engage that group.
Marlene, if I might just, this is Brian. Hi, everyone. I've just been listening. I think what will be important is as we do the online engagement and the public meeting, that everyone, Julia's and JD and I think it was Mike and others and Marlene, all of your networks, like the more the better, the more diverse the better in that virtual and online, that next front piece, and then getting all those folks in the room with us. So not waiting, but being part of the process across. So I hope that would be, collaboration at its finest is all of us like enlarging the tent. So thanks in advance.
Thanks, Brian. I just want to, we have large networks, right? But I also think we talk about effective communication from the county side, outside of typical email, right? All of us get water bills, tax notifications, whatever. I think it would behoove us as a county to invest in hard copy type correspondence that can go to our citizenry. And you may be surprised, right, how many people actually reply to that. I know there's a lot of cost incurred with that. Digital seems to be more cost effective, but I would actually look at some of these folks, because we have a digital divide in Arlington, aren't on the email, aren't looking at even, channel 40, the TV, the government channel. So we got to meet people where they are to the extent possible. Then we got to be able to measure the effectiveness of that, make sure we're doing that. Because activists like myself and others, this is part-time for us. We don't get paid to do this communication, right? But thank you, Brian. I just wanted to lift up and let you know my thoughts on that, okay?
Yeah, no, look, I appreciate that. And we are doing a lot of in the community. What we've found, I think what we've learned is where people get their information and where their trust is in the other people they know that are doing it. So even if we send postcards or letters, if they see it in their church newsletter, or if they see it in their condo newsletter, or they see it on their flyer on their in their apartment building, or they get it from a friend or an organization they're already connected to, they're more likely to participate than if their government asks them. And we've seen that success over and over. But all of it, it's an and. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. Alice, did you have a question?
Good morning. Thank you for all the work you all are doing. It's really great. I guess I was going to say something similar to Bryna, especially when I heard the first online feedback tool, how can you get folks to go online and do that? Exactly what we're talking about, the digital divide. And so I'm curious, not to list it off today, but what are the groups of folks that we are really going to approach, to get them to talk to their people, really getting into those networks and helping people fill that out, or either coming to one of these events when we need to get beyond the certain group that come and really get into the folks that aren't as participatory, don't know the process. You know, they're facing the same challenges and barriers that Elise was listing earlier in the meeting.
Yeah, no, those are great points. We've put together a sort of a breakdown of the organizations that we want to be reaching out to, and we can certainly share more information with the subcommittee. I do want to make sure that we move to the next item. So if you don't mind, Alice, if I can share that with you via email, I'd be happy to do that. Oh, go ahead, Brian. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say this, share it, and then I would throw the question back to the group. Tell us, where are we missing?
Yes.
You know, like tell us, so we can collectively, all of us,
yes.
You know, this is like coordination, collaboration. Like it's not what we say, it's what all of us are thinking. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
helpful.
Brian, and let's send the list to everyone, not just me.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so let's, if we could just do Mike Heminger and then Nicole, and then I do want to make sure that we move on to the next agenda item rather quickly.
Yeah, thanks. For one, I think we're really rushing through this, you know, and I think about the final product that's going to come out of this and how we're really moving through it. I think we really should be going after quality over quantity. And I know we have a hard stop and I want to respect folks' time, but I also want to make sure that we give the community a really thoughtful final product. And so the thing I was going to say was, you know, there's a lot of other organizations that we can reach out to. Alice, you touched on some of the points that I want to talk about, but I think we need like a specific outreach plan. So Brian, I like where you're going. I'm happy to contribute to that, but it's like on this day, we're going to take this actions. We're going to engage with this community to prepare them for, you know, the meeting on this date. And then the last thing I'll say is I want to encourage us to use different facilities, you know, in Southwest Arlington, maybe Barcroft or Arlington Mill or Walter Reed. I think those are the communities that we need to hear the most from. And it's an easy way to kind of meet them where they're at. Thanks so much.
Nicole, did you have one other point?
Yeah, really quick. I will just say that if we're looking for people to go beyond the people that usually show up, I mean, all the organizations that you listed, we definitely need to reach out to. But to JD's point, that's how you get to people that don't usually show up. And I feel like sometimes we pick and choose which initiatives we want to do that broader outreach to with mailers and which ones we don't. And the fact that we've kind of invite only our entire roundtable thing, like I know a lot of prospective home buyers and I didn't even know that when that was happening. So like we could have shared that opportunity, for example. And so the more that we can get people that aren't traditionally involved in this, the better. I wish we would have known more about the roundtables and when those were happening. But if we can get it beyond just like CivFed and like the NAACP is brilliant, but like I see all of the same people all the time. And if we're trying to do that, then like we should, I think, do some more outreach. I know, Brianna, you have a list of condo and apartment buildings, maybe just putting a flyer outside of some of our major commercial centers in each one of our metro areas in a highly visible space. Maybe that would also help. But I want to focus on trying to get those harder to reach people too.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay, so I think it probably makes sense to move on to the next agenda item. And I'm going to turn it over to Russell to walk us through this next section. I will say that we'll probably go a little bit past 10, so if you do have to jump off, you know, that's fine. Otherwise, if you're available to stick around, please do, because I think it'll be an interesting conversation. So over to you, Russell.
Thank you, Caitlin. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. Just want to make sure before I start, I don't want to get halfway through on mute. So today we're going to take some time to begin to collectively address the core questions that Arlington County has been using to guide our understanding of racial equity as it relates to a broad range of issues. Obviously, in our case, this is homeownership. Our goal is to use this information to craft policy and program recommendations that will help achieve more equitable outcomes in our community. So employing a racial equity lens to homeownership is essential to the study. As we've looked at the homeownership environment through the barriers analysis and our program outcomes, we've presented a wide array of information already that we hope will help to inform our use of the tool. One moment here, having some issues. Okay, so from the onset, the homeownership studies highlighted racial equity as a priority. The study scope really established the goal for the study, which is to develop homeownership program recommendations that better meet the vision and goals of our community. And the second one, I think here is key, to create better homeownership outcomes for people of color and other underserved populations, and to increase available resources for existing homeowners. Next slide. Yeah. And the subcommittee itself in its first meeting suggested changes to the bylaws to more purposefully center our discussion around racial equity, stating that it is the subcommittee's role to offer a diverse perspective and guidance to staff through the application of a racial equity lens, to ensure that racial equity is being considered and that the homeownership study furthers the countywide priority to eliminate, reduce, and prevent disparities. And so, this committee is certainly has been a strong supporter of using this tool. So before we get into the tool itself and hear from you all, this is really an opportunity to hear from you. Some founding, so we share the same kind of where we're starting from. There's what is equity? There's many ways of defining equity. And if I ask each of you to define it, I'm sure I'd get each person would have an individual definition with their own nuances. But to help center our discussion today, I'd like to offer some definitions that the county's been using that hopefully we can share in this process. So first, equity is that all populations have access to community conditions and opportunities needed to reach their full potential and to experience optimal well-being. Furthermore, that your status as being a person of color, a woman, poor, an immigrant, or a refugee, non-heteronormative, differently abled, or one's area of residence, these should not be predictors of adverse life outcomes. And more specifically, when we speak of racial equity, what we mean is eliminating race-based outcome gaps so that race does not predict one's success, while also improving outcomes for all. And so to close those gaps, we target improvements to those most burdened and move beyond the provisions of services to transforming policies, institutions, and structures. So the equity lens itself, the county's been using this framework to guide the discussion. It asks us to contemplate 5 questions: who benefits, who is burdened, who is missing, how do we know, and lastly, what do we do about it? So today's discussion will focus primarily on the first 4 questions, but don't worry, the whole study itself is really aimed at producing final recommendations that really answer that 5th one, what do we do, which is probably the most important question. And a little bit more information before we get going, because the lens is broad. What are we considering? Next slide, please. So what are we considering as we apply the racial equity lens? We're looking at the home ownership environment. So the ownership component of the housing market that includes all of its subcomponents, and we're using this broad focus because the goal of our homeownership study is to develop program recommendations, and we really want to be able to tailor those recommendations to identify areas of need, so to create better homeownership outcomes for people of color and other underserved populations. In other words, the program recommendations at the end of our process should be related to the equity analysis and designed to improve those outcomes. So as we go through this analysis, there may be some areas that are beyond the county's ability to really influence, but that's okay. Don't hesitate to add anything you might. So as we're going to open it up to everyone here to provide their input, and Elisa is going to help us with some note taking as we go through this. So the first question, consider who benefits, more specifically, what groups benefit from the current homeownership environment. And rather than
Russell, you're breaking up a little bit. You might want to go off camera.
okay, I'll do that.
Save your bandwidth a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Anyways, you don't need to see my face anymore. So, so yeah, we'll be asking how do we know at the same time. So if there's supporting information that we can point to as we identify who benefits, and then to also kind of call out what are those benefits? How are those benefits manifested? And so with that, I'd like to open it up. And does anybody have who would like to start this off? I mean, when we think of who benefits from the current home ownership environment, what are your thoughts?
I can start. People who benefit from the current homeownership environment, I would say people that have family resources to help them with down payment, closing costs, and also have family support.
I would say people that were able to access home ownership, or whose parents or family members were able to access home ownership before the local housing market really exploded. So people who are on the carousel from the beginning, rather than having to jump on while it's spinning faster and faster.
Also, a photo one would be the people that don't have overburdened with the student loan debts, because they're usually in line quicker than the ones that aren't even considered it because of the debt payments.
Some of these overlap, like people that have family resources may have had family that helped them pay their student loans off. So yeah, so some of these may overlap.
I would say, I mean, wealth and people who have wealth and income, because you have to look at the ability to pay for a mortgage, but also the ability to provide a down payment. So, you know, it's that obviously they intersect. The wealth piece, both are connected to the racial equity conversation, given disparities in income, but the wealth conversation, particularly given the legacy of discrimination in the housing market. We're looking at this from a racial equity lens. We're talking about who was able to, you know, be able to, who were the people that had access to home ownership earlier in the county's history, able to have that intergenerational wealth passed on, and who was locked out from that. I think we all discussed this, you know, but we've discussed this, you know, a couple of times over the course of this study. But it's, you know, the history of redlining and race-based discrimination in the housing market that we're still seeing reverberations of that.
And one other thing, since I deal with it on a daily basis, we're having an easier time with the people that are salary employees. The hourly employee person is much more difficult to get into a mortgage. They have variable income, sometimes 2 and 3 different jobs, and it becomes a challenge to get a mortgage and to show consistent, steady pay, which is what we need to make a mortgage.
Hi, this is Brian. Can I ask a question about the question? It says who benefits from the homeownership, but is part of the question also who benefits from the homeownership program?
No, not today. We're not asking that question today because we're really, you know, our programs, you know, we have done some analysis on that, and we will, you know, as we do this, provide an analysis on that. But we want to address the home ownership market, who's left out of that, and
Okay.
who's currently benefiting from that. But thanks, it's a good question. It's a good point of clarification.
Thank you.
Because, yeah, go multiple ways. I see Alice Hogan had her hand raised.
Thanks, Russell. I was thinking about folks who may have role models who have already been in the ownership market, or who have a trusted person in their life that has socialized them to this process. And, you know, if it's all mysterious to you and you don't have people around you who have done these things, it's just one more barrier. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else joining us virtually?
I'll add one more thing. Some of the more recent people that I have worked with are living at home and saving saving for that down payment and closing costs by living rent-free for a couple of years when they've completed their education.
So living with family and friends.
Living with family and friends and not having any housing costs right now. So they're paying off their debt and they're saving money.
With high rents, that's smart.
Because the high rent is a huge burden, because people are not able to save if they're paying a huge percentage of their income towards rent.
I think Alice made a really good point in terms of people that have the resources of, having been socialized in this way and having been shepherded through homeownership, or the homeownership process in the early years, or at least started to think about it. Because what we find is oftentimes, when people are the first in their family to purchase a home, it is really, really difficult to know what questions to ask, to know what you don't know, and really to feel comfortable and grapple with the financial necessities associated with homeownership, knowing that you are it. You may not have family as a network to fall back on. So when you see those condo fees, or you think about those maintenance costs, it can really be a mental challenge because you don't really have a role model to go to and to kind of bounce ideas off of. So I think that's a big point.
You'll know more across.
Yeah, thank you. I think my comments are all along the same line, and just wanted to note, just people who have credit, good credit or any credit. There's a lot of people who don't have that, and it just goes back to all the other remarks that people were making of just probably understanding the credit market and how that influences your ability to purchase a home.
I'd say also there's people who deal in credit outside the typical U.S. normative financial structure. If you look at, I did some work in Minneapolis where there's a large East African community, and instead of using typical mortgage products because of some cultural differences, beliefs in a large Muslim population that has restrictions on lending, and they use lending circles and other non-traditional forms of finance, savings, wealth, access to wealth that are not sort of baked into our typical housing finance and mortgage system. So that's just one example, but that the system does not always play well with any outside of that typical conception of credit and financing.
Anyone else on this question? I think these are all a good work, and I know we said we were going to try and tie this to the question, how do we know? And I'm going to take that on as some homework. I think much of the things raised today, I've read plenty of research that kind of supports and backs that up. So I'll try and tie that to that as we write up these notes and findings. So I appreciate that. Anyone else on who benefits, and maybe some thoughts on what those benefits look like? Okay.
I mean, Russell, I could just say, cash on hand. I don't personally understand where that is coming from, but people, I guess developers or who are purchasing cash in hand. So, how can a regular homeowner or home purchaser, compete with actual cash, no debt purchase? So I don't know who that is, but I know that's happening. So that's another, and of course, in our environment here, just in terms of inventory, of course, we have tear down. So people coming in or builders coming in able to buy the house, and with the knowing they're going to make $500,000 on the new product that'll be on that spot, someone trying to come in as a first-time home buyer could never compete with that kind of those resources.
Excellent point, and I think that's an area to probe as well. All right, well, so we move on to the next question, which is, who's burdened, and burden might seem like a peculiar way to think about this, but given the current ecosystem or environment for home ownership, what kind of burdens are created, and who bears those burdens?
Anyway, it's just the inverse of everything that we just said. People that don't have wealth, don't have higher incomes, don't have that family support history of home ownership from both, passing down assets, but also passing down knowledge perspective. So basically, yeah, just the inverse of everything we just said applies. Not that other people aren't burdened, but.
And also, with Richard's comment earlier, people that have large student loan payments, even though those student loan payments have been on pause now for several years, they're going to start coming up, I guess, later this year. So some people have enormous student loan debt because they have this wonderful job, but they have $600, $700, $800 student loan payments, which just sort of kill the deal.
My thought on it was not to change the subject, is it turns the people that don't need to commute into commuters because they have to force them out. So city employees, they would love to live in this county, but they may have to move out to the country because of their income. So they become commuters and are not as accessible. So they're affected. They have to stay to work here. They become commuters, which is burdening them.
I'd say people that have cost burdens now, housing cost burdens. If you are paying too much, more than you can afford, can sustainably afford for rent, or have other precarious living situations right now, that makes it even harder to get to that point where you can even contemplate entering the homeownership market. So this is all interconnected. Our tight rental market exacerbates our homeownership challenges.
Nicole?
Actually was going to say a version of that, which is that all renters essentially now in our home ownership market are paying more than allows them to save for a down payment for existing housing stock in the county. So essentially anyone that didn't get into the housing market before 2017, when interest rates were still low, we don't have an income to savings ratio that makes any sense for the millennial Gen Z generations.
Thank you. Alice?
In terms of burdens, I was thinking about seniors, even who are homeowners, without, like we talked about earlier, a housing stock smaller and accessible for folks to transition into. There's nowhere for folks to leave the bigger home and go to something smaller and adapted to their needs that doesn't cost the same or more than what they're making do in now. And then you'd add a condo fee or healthcare or assisted living costs to that. So you have people trapped in their specific financial situation when their physical needs are changing. So that's a population we want to keep a tab on as well. And then there was one other, but now I'm forgetting who it was. I'll come back if I can think of it.
Thank you.
I would also mention people with disabilities are very burdened home purchase because of our housing stock and also, of course, because of price. Because some of these folks are on fixed incomes or on the very low end of the income spectrum. So they are definitely burdened when it comes to home ownership.
Very good. I'd like to move on. Alice, did you remember?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I was thinking about condos just as a whole organization that, if where condo fees are so high, and I don't know this, it's more of a question, are older condos having trouble selling their own units because people don't want to get into or can't afford to get into a mortgage plus a high condo fee scenario that they can't afford. So if the the older and more rundown these buildings become, they are going to be a burden to those who currently own them as well.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, the resale prospects, it's kind of a different angle on home ownership, the ability to sell when you're at that point. It's part of that continuum. We'll move on to the next question. And I think there's a lot of overlap with what we talked about here with who's burdened. And I think part of that's the nature of this particular issue of home ownership, but who's missing. But as we talk about who's missing, we spoke about this much earlier in the meeting. I think we had several comments on who's missing from our current process. So I think, as we talk about who's missing, like under who's burdened, we talked quite a bit about folks kind of who aren't able to access homeownership as who's burdened, but they're also who's missing. So I think a lot of those kind of bleed over into this. But there's also the question, I think, of who's missing from our current this process in this study. So I think about those in both ways.
We could benefit from some additional outreach to the Latino community. I know we've done some, but
yeah, we have to meet them where they're at,
yep.
Which is not traditionally Monday through even Saturday.
And we mentioned the church, faith-based, because they have such good outreach already to their flock or their parishioners. Where is it? Flock is not right.
Yeah, I've had a couple interesting conversations the last couple of days, not specific to this, but about sort of outreach to the Latino population, Latino community in Arlington. So that's something that I think that we should add, add to our areas of focus and trying to reach out to who's missing.
All right, anybody? I think we can take some of the comments from earlier this meeting also to kind of help us with this, because there was certainly numerous comments about our outreach efforts and how to expand those to include persons whose voices might not have been in the initial roundtables.
And I'll just add, so I mean, I know we're going to carry this forward, so I won't talk at length about it now. But again, the piece with the African American community, historically victims of redlining, so they're missing from disproportionately missing from home ownership right now. So can't go without saying. But I will say one additional group that may have been raised, but what I'll flag specifically is the immigrant community and the various immigrant communities, because there's a lot of differences within different immigrant groups. Again, getting to some of those cultural differences around finance, networks, family and social supports, like looking specifically at some of those different networks and how we can engage and create programs and policies that work in different contexts. Again, this is front of mind just because I was recently doing some work in a very specific immigrant diaspora, but it really struck me that there's some lessons that we can take away from that.
That's good.
One of the things that we are seeing that would probably fit into the who's burdened and who's missing is larger families. So, husband, wife, or 2 adults, 1 adult, 4 children, that sort of thing. It is very difficult to find something that's affordable to purchase in Canada.
I would also mention that the missing people are the people that are also remitting funds to family members in other parts of the world. They feel a huge burden that they need to support their family members. So they are missing from the homeownership.
And just continuing on a theme, the larger families, supporting families elsewhere, multi-generational households. Just leave it.
You guys could speak up a little bit too, just it's okay, just the mics.
Multi-generational families, 3 or 4 generations living under the same roof. Some of whom may have disabilities, some may have other things going on. really difficult.
Who's by nature of having multiple generations, by definition, their needs evolve with time. And so the housing situation needs to evolve with time.
Good. Phil, did you have something to say?
Yeah, just along the same lines, I think we have to acknowledge that lower, income buyers and at lower price points, the market isn't set up. I mean, we're so lucky to have, Habitat and LEDC and other kind of mission-driven partners, but for loan officers and some realtors, they're not making as much money on selling, working with these buyers. There's a lot more work involved, and for not a lot of additional income for a lot of the partners. I think we have to be realistic about that.
True.
All right, then. I think this has been great. And I want to remind people that, these questions are questions that we should be continually asking ourselves as we go through the study. If we can go to the last slide, but the last question is what do we do? So we're not going to get to that today. Obviously, that the purpose of this study is to develop recommendations and thinking about these questions about who's benefiting, who's burdened, and who's missing. We want to tailor recommendations to better reach those people who are burdened and missing. So that is something that, through the rest of this study, as we're thinking about recommendations, we want to think about how they might specifically help to create better outcomes for those who are burdened and missing. So we're not going to get to that question today. That's a question that we're going to answer over the next several months of this process. But thank you, and I appreciate all your input today. And again, we're going to have to work with this and come back with some it tidied up a little bit, but thanks. I think we got a lot of great input today on this. So I'm going to hand it back over to Karen.
I can take it.
Okay.
No worries.
Or Caitlin?
Yes, and I think, thank you so much, Russell. I think this is a really interesting conversation. As Russell said, our next steps are we will be pulling this information together into a summary, and we will definitely share it with the group. We're, again, going to be starting our visioning process in the next few weeks, so please look out for more information there. We'll also be sharing a roundtable summary report soon that goes over a lot of the same information that Elise reported on earlier in the meeting. And just, again, look out for more information about how you can become involved in the upcoming process and how you can share more information with your networks. I think we want to do a good job of sort of getting the word out there, and it's really going to depend on both our efforts, but also help from the subcommittee to make sure that happens. With that being said, I think.
Thank you for attending.
Yes, thank you for attending, and we'll. We are right on time, yeah. And again, look out for more information soon. And thanks everyone for being part of the process today.
Caitlin, did you say the next meeting is July 11th?
July 11th. That's right.
Okay. Thank you.